session is called The Journey to Nothing When the Goal is Zero Waste. So I'd like to welcome Juliana Sementina, Marketing Manager, Native Trails. Please help me welcome her to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're going to start with a video.
My name is Naomi Nielsen, and I'm the founder of Native Trails. Native Trails combines age-old artisan tradition with sustainable materials. Within that realm, we create sophisticated and functional kitchen and bath designs that we're proud to share with the world. Ever since I was a little girl, my passion was traveling, exploring, and learning about other cultures. It started with going down to Mexico with my family, where I was always lured into these craft markets that we'd come across. And I was enamored by the people and what they were making and selling. Over time, that grew into the idea that if I could somehow connect these people with a bigger market for their goods, it could potentially make a big impact on their lives. This is where the inspiration for Native Trails came from, and that's where the idea of a collaborative team began.
As you just saw from that video, Native Trails creates luxury kitchen and bath products, combining artisan heritage with innovative design and sustainable materials. As a woman-owned B Corp certified company, we're driven by a deeper purpose: to create beauty that not only enriches homes, but also supports communities and respects the planet for generations to come. On the screen, you'll see just a few products. Like this is Avalon, our native stone freestanding bathtub and our new terracotta finish. Native stone is a sustainable concrete material that combines natural, renewable jute fiber as reinforcement, making it lighter than traditional concrete. Santorini bathtub is an example of our hammered copper collection, made from 100% recycled copper, hand-hammered in Mexico. Also from our copper collection, this is Pinnacle Kitchen Sink, which is hand-hammered copper, but then coated in nickel. We also have bath vanities. This is our Vintner's collection. It's one of two collections of vanities that use reclaimed oak used in the winemaking process, salvaged from wineries near our company headquarters in the Central Coast of California. The Winemaker series utilizes that same wood, but we process it in an entirely different way for a contemporary look. Since sustainability is so important to us, while some of our vanities are made with reclaimed materials, others, like Topanga Vanity, are made with FSC certified wood. This one is solid walnut. You can head over to our booth at North Hall and 1863, and you'll see all of our exciting new products, including this one, Natoma, which is a brand new wall-mounted native stone sink. And also Arcada, which is an undermount trough sink available in 3 sizes. That is a finalist for Best of KBIS. We're very excited for that ceremony in a few hours. We wanted to sponsor these sessions because sustainability is in our heart and soul at Native Trails, both social and environmental, the people and the planet. We went through the rigorous process of becoming and maintaining a standing as a certified B Corporation to hold ourselves accountable as we grow, because we strongly believe in the power of using business as a force for good. As the Sustainability Track sponsor, we are now pleased to sponsor this incredibly important sustainability topics at KBIS 2025. And now I'm pleased to introduce the next session, Journey to Nothing When the Goal is Zero Waste. Please welcome to the stage moderator Matt Power, editor-in-chief of Green Builder magazine, and our panelist Joel Wong, co-founder of OWIU Design, Matt Sanders, owner and principal at Matt Sanders Interiors, and last but not least, Naomi Nielsen, the founder and CEO of Native Trails. Welcome and have a great discussion.
Hey.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Power. I'm the editor-in-chief of Green Builder magazine. I've been covering the building industry for about 30 years now and worked for just about every trade magazine on the residential side of the building. So my specialty is green and sustainable construction, reconstruction, and materials and products. Today, we're going to sort of delve into some of the topics, especially around kitchens and baths. I think we've got some great panelists. We had a little prep session, and we had some good conversations, and maybe we can reenact some of those for you today. One of the things I wanted to say is with kitchens especially, a lot of the technology has sort of reached a peak point where you're not getting a lot more efficiency, for example, out of kitchen faucets or dishwashers or that sort of thing. So materials and the choice of what type of materials that you use are now the green frontier, and they're the place where we can reduce our carbon impacts and get greener. So that being said, I'd like to lead off with sort of a question about finding sustainable products that are not greenwashed. Okay, so you know, if you walk around here, everybody's going to have a little bit of a green story, and some of their green stories are more true than others, right? So I'd like to throw out to our panelists, how do you identify products that are genuinely going to raise the bar on efficiency or on resource management, as opposed to stuff that makes a green claim? Why don't we start with you, Naomi? Yeah.
I would say looking at things such as certifications is always helpful. You know, there's recycled content, there's FSC certified wood products, which means that, you know, the wood is coming from, it's grown and harvested in a sustainable manner that, you know, protects the whole, the ecosystem, and the whole chain of custody is tracked, so it's a pretty serious thing.
Yep.
That helps a lot. You know, there's like B Corp certification is one thing that is, B corporations are companies that go through a very rigorous process to get certified, and it covers not just environmental sustainability, but also social initiatives and you know, governments, as far as like your employees and how you run the business. But I think that's one thing, that if you can find a company that does have the B Corp certification, you know that they have gone through a lot to get it, and they're not greenwashing, because they wouldn't go through all that trouble.
Yeah. And Matt, also could maybe just give a little introduction of your work and yourself also before you answer that one. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt Sanders. I'm an interior designer based out of Los Angeles. I work on mostly residential projects, and I do a lot of what I like to call construction design, which is working alongside an architect to help create livable personal spaces as people are building the homes or renovating houses. You know, my design ethos is very much rooted in vintage, as are my licensed collections that I have in the product arena. But yeah, you know, I really specialize in places that feel like they have lots of personality, but are very, very livable. So, you know, when I approach a project and I think about sustainability, you know, when sourcing things, I think less about, you know, whether or not the product has its green card, I like to call it, but really about whether, you know, how we're going to approach this project in a way that could reduce waste. And I think, you know, my focus and attention on kind of sourcing vintage really lends itself to, you know, that effort. And even with construction projects, you know, we often are going towards local markets. We're looking at salvage yards. We're looking at, you know, the resale markets. And, you know, with furniture, it's very easy to do that. There's tons of beautiful vintage furniture to find and source everywhere. But in the construction space, you know, I think that's one great way to, you know, help the budget, but it's also a great way to, you know, think about repurposing things that already exist and figuring out ways that you can reduce waste by kind of like, you know, repurposing things that are out there already and using the local sources.
And Joel, you're an architect as well. You do remodeling, and if you want to mention any other aspects of your company, but talk about how you specify products with an eye towards sustainability. What kind of criteria do you use?
Yeah, so just a bit of a background. I'm Joel. I'm one of the founders of OWIU Design. We are a architectural design and build firm based in LA that focuses on home remodels and new builds, and also commercial spaces. So in our practice, we focus a lot on thoughtful design and careful craftsmanship. And I guess to touch on your whole what do we look out for greenwashing? I feel like just because like there's a recycle label on a plastic bottle doesn't mean it's going to get recycled. I think that's the main idea, that we have to ensure that we know that the life cycle of a product doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to not end up in a landfill when demolition happens.
Right.
So I think it's important to understand what happens on the ground, especially what happens to a home that is getting built, or what happens to a home that is going to get torn down in 50 to 100 years' time. Specifying materials that are definitely not toxic, I think is crucial, especially like in light of the fires. We begin to see how there's the whole idea of, oh, if it's toxic, like let's not touch it. But
Right.
when the fires happen, like it's all in the air right now. And
So you think because of the you're talking about because of the wildfires, so many homes were destroyed and people became more aware of the toxic materials in the homes, both the ones that burned and the ones that didn't.
Exactly.
So now they're asking you they want to know the pedigree of a material before they put it in.
Exactly.
So maybe one silver lining that came out of the wildfire situation. So let's go a little further into salvaging and upcycling. So this is a huge trend. If you go on Wayfair right now, and type in mid-century modern, you're going to find a ton of references to objects that actually look salvaged but are not. So there's a reuse, sort of a surge in reuse and salvaging of materials, and maybe you could talk about how that's integrated into your company and how you all integrate it into your business.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, at Native Trails, like reusing, repurposing is something that we're super passionate about. I think I inherited this from my parents, who restore the old homes, and were always looking for interesting things they could reuse. And so what we do, one of the things we do at Native Trails when we're looking for new products to introduce, is we're searching for materials that maybe are destined for the landfill, or maybe something that people don't see the value in, or don't see that it would be worthwhile to try to repurpose it. And we can see, we look and try to find, okay, what would be something that we can give a second life to that will actually increase its value. And so, I think there's.
Can you give an example of?
There's one.
Yeah. Is that one of them right there?
That bath furniture is made from reclaimed winemaking materials. So after these wine staves go through their useful life in the winemaking process, they typically go by the palletful. I mean, truckfuls of them go to the landfill. And we found a way to clean up these wine-stained pieces of wood, and clean the sugars and tannins off of them, and bring the beauty of the wood out. You have to be kind of passionate. It's a lot of work.
Yep.
But it's so, it creates something that's so beautiful and has, such authentic soul behind it, I think.
What about you, Matt? Can you offer maybe some examples from your own work of how you've upcycled and salvaged and reused?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I'm a big fan of natural stone. So I have a collection of stone vendors and salvage yards. And whenever I'm doing a project, whether it's a personal project or a client project, I love to visit and scour those salvage yards for beautiful stone. Because often the ones that are being sold or they're going to get destroyed are kind of the most exotic ones. And those are the ones I'm always drawn to anyway. Yeah. Or they're ones that are kind of in smaller formats. So, I like to think of design often as, you can design into certain limitations. So, going and perusing these places to see what's available and what can be repurposed will often bend your imagination into, thinking of something that you normally wouldn't have designed out the gate. So in my Palm Springs house that I just renovated, all of the bathrooms are done in these really crazy stones that I did in patchwork marble. And that's because there were all these very beautiful, exotic, colorful, crazy marbles, but they weren't in the largest format. So I kind of created my own tile pieces with these. And one bathroom has this very Mondrian kind of marble mismatched kind of look. And overall, it kind of has a very 70s groovy feel. And they're the two rooms that when people walk into the house, they have the most wow factor. And the materials probably cost the least out of any room in the house that I did. Yeah. I think sourcing with that mindset just helps reduce the footprint of a project overall.
How about you, Joel? Do you have some maybe something you've done in the recent past, or?
I think a really great example was, surprisingly, one of our first bathroom remodels, which was our office, which we still have right now,
Yeah.
where we literally like tried to make it as rustic and simple as possible.
Yeah.
And I think back to your question, like we want to find out what's readily available for us most of the time. And the first search that we tried to look for was like a minimal concrete sink. And
Yeah.
surprisingly enough, it was a Native Trails concrete sink.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we just went to the lumber yard, got a live edge piece of wood for like $500, and we basically did almost the entire bathroom remodel in less than $1,500.
Yeah.
And it looks great, and it's still there. I would like to show you guys some photos. So I think back to sourcing, and like you mentioned, like how like people are trying to imitate that whole
Yeah.
vintage look. I feel like there's things all around you, and as long as they're somewhat functional and there's some form of aesthetic appeal that goes in the overall look of the entire space, like you can always make it work somehow.
It seems like also you're talking about there's a lot of mixing of old and new, right? You're probably not gonna create an entire kitchen or bath out of all salvaged materials, right? But they become accent points. They become the sink, or they become, the cabinet doors. And if you can bring in those accents, I've heard other architects say it brings sort of a feeling that someone has lived, that there's life there, that someone has lived there, right? Gives it a feeling of I guess, depth. Let's go into sort of the sales aspect a little bit of these sustainable products and ideas. So one of the things that we run into at Green Builder frequently is sometimes it costs a little more to be sustainable, right? And sometimes what the homeowner or the home buyer is focused on is the countertops, and it's the look of the countertops, not the material of the countertops. So crossing that bridge into a product that they really like, that really looks good and meets their aesthetic, but also has some sustainable credibility, right? And is raising the bar on carbon is sometimes a challenge. Maybe could you each give an example of how you've met that challenge of selling sustainability?
I mean, the reality is for us, what we see in the market is that people, sustainability is not usually the number one thing on people's minds when they're picking out products or when they're designing a space. Sometimes it is, but for the vast majority of people, they really want something that is functional and beautiful, right? They want beautiful, and they want to feel good in their space. So I think people feeling good about their space is really important, and then for them, when they find out that something on top of looking beautiful or being super functional is also sustainable, that's just kind of adds, it's like icing on the cake. But but that story, I mean, the story behind the sustainable product is what sells it, for people to understand that, wow, how the impact that it's going to have on the next generation, and the story behind that product, that this product has soul, it has a story, and people love to talk about that.
If you go on Pinterest, what do you see? White kitchens, white kitchens, white kitchens, right? I bet, Matt, that you can tell us that is not the only thing people want, right? So, I mean, talk about that. Like, what's the universe of ideas that's not being explored?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's authenticity. And I think if you look at where culture is headed, you look at social media, how I would say 10 years ago, it was a vastly different landscape than it is now. It was polished, perfect. Everyone had to have the most perfect looking rooms, and their outfits are so perfect, and everything is like this glossy, very well-branded representation of themselves. And now you go over to TikTok and you see that people are just being very sloppy and very authentic, and they're filming from their car, and they're eating, and they're putting their makeup while they're talking to you. And I think the same thing translates over into design now. People don't want a showroom for a home. They don't want something that's so perfect. They're looking for something that's a little undecorated, and they're looking for something that feels truly like them. And the way that they get that is by investing in the story of everything that they're sourcing. And I've always been the kind of designer that people hire because they want to have fun. They want to go shopping with me. They want like a best friend along the journey. They want someone to knock ideas off of. And now I think even deeper than that, it's become this journey of finding things that really tap into their own psyche, you know, what turns them on, what makes them tick, and then also just the story of finding these things. So to sell the idea of sustainability isn't that hard, because the journey of digging a little deeper for things that are repurposed or salvaged, or a more inventive way of thinking about using something in the house, is that extra story for the client to say, hey, guess where I got this? It was the craziest thing. Matt took me to a salvage yard, and we just discovered this like incredible blue piece of marble. And you know, that's kind of the biggest luxury now, I think, is to have true ownership and endowment in everything that you're sourcing and putting into your own home, so you have complete ownership of everything and not just, oh, I hired a designer and he picked this out for me.
Joel, I'm going to be a little more specific with you. So give me an example of a client who came to you, right, and where you had a discussion about sustainability, about, you know, a design that you were working on. When and where did the topic come up, and how did you handle it?
To be honest, unless it's like a commercial client who has some form of requirement, that conversation never ever comes up.
That's interesting.
And it's definitely something that we would have to be the ones educating on that approach to the build out, right? I think it's a philosophy that we uphold at the start of the project to make sure, hey, this is kind of the ethos of like what we want to make sure. There are certain benchmarks that we want to meet and certain criteria we want to meet as we work on your project from start to finish. And I think with that in mind, it's where all these small pieces will come in of like having the selections, whether it's something, an approach that, or like a specification that's more sustainable than another, right? We definitely want to go for the more sustainable route. I think to also kind of touch a little bit more on like sustainability not being a term that's always thrown out there and not really being able to pinpoint. I think for us as a firm, we would kind of feel like sustainability is very similar to longevity, right? We want to make sure that if a product can last through a certain lifetime, like I think you can kind of call it sustainable, right? Something that's not toxic, something that can last, something that you can pass on to the future generation, something that when the future owner purchases a home, like that's the thing that they don't want to rip out.
Right.
You know, I think that's where we can start having that conversation on what sustainability is.
That actually jibes. We did a survey this year. We do it every year about you know, how people feel about, you know, their houses and what their priorities are. And for the first time this year, all different age groups are most concerned with the operating costs, like in terms of new homeowners, the operating costs of their homes. It used to be only the youngest generation was there, but now even the older generations, maybe it's because of inflation or, you know, just everything is more expensive. And I think there's always that in the back of your mind, the return on investment conversation, right? What is this financially a good move for me? So, I mean, that leads into sort of my next topic is, if you're trying to create value, right, and the person's like, I want this to be beautiful, but I also want it to have a lot of value, and I don't want to be too weird, right, because I want to be able to resell this. How do you balance the changes and the products that you put in there so they feel like they've got a place they love, but it's also a place that you've added financial value to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Joel mentioned about durability, that's huge. You know, putting in pieces that are going to last, that are built to last. You know, and if there's something with the story that's built to last. I mean, like these vanities that we make from reclaimed wood. The wood is, you know, decades or, you know, even over 100 years old, and it's reclaimed from old barns and old fencing that's falling down, but it's incredible wood that's so aged, and it's very hard, very durable. And these vanities are built in California by these incredible furniture makers that like build them like they used to. And I mean, these things will last longer than any of us are going to be alive.
Right.
And they're so, timeless. So I think timeless design
Timelessness, yeah.
is also really a
Yeah.
key.
So timelessness can be a sustainability value.
Yes,
So,
Exactly.
yeah. I mean, it's true. There's a lot of different types, like you mentioned, durability, right? So your designs, I'm sure, like I've seen a couple of your designs here, you've got a very sort of flamboyant style, right? So how do you get your style, how do you make sure that they feel like that style is going to be timeless, right? It's going to have that ROI that they also want. Yeah.
I think also it's about, they'll get the return on their investment. They'll have longevity in a product if it ages well.
Yeah.
So picking materials and finishes that get more beautiful over time. So unlacquered metals, I love the way that those, like brass gets patinaed over time, or coppers start to oxidize. That's truly beautiful, and you could have those pieces forever. They just keep getting more messed up looking and more gorgeous.
Yeah.
Natural stones do this. Again, I think even in the furniture arena, I source a lot of, vintage Turkish and Persian rugs because they're already 200 years old.
Right, they
So
made it this far.
the dog pees on it. It's been through a lot worse.
Right. And Joel, maybe you could touch on like new materials as well, right? What are some new materials that are, maybe not what we would associate with, like you were talking about 10 years ago, with the shiny polished kitchens and the shiny polished, bathrooms. What's some stuff that clients are accepting now that
So in our practice, we like to always be efficient with our material applications.
Yeah.
I guess something that we use a lot now would be actually Japanese plaster for our wall finishes. We see, it's really common to have like lime wash walls, Venetian plaster walls, but Japanese plaster, we call it shikui plaster. It's actually made of like an aggregate with sand and straw.
Yeah.
So they're all like very natural materials that we like to specify for our
So
products.
is that like a raised? He's talking about that like that embossed kind of look where it's like they do like a wall treatment on it. It's called Japanese plaster. Yeah. So it's very hard and very durable.
Yeah,
right?
and it's something they've been using for like 1,000 years.
Right.
So those are, I guess, like more. I wouldn't even call it ancient. Like those are really old techniques that we use for wall treatments, and they look great, right? Like now people are, like you mentioned, like not going for the overly polished look. They want it to be a little rough and a little bit rugged, right? And it gives more character in the home.
Yeah. So one of the themes of this talk was going to be, how to get your waste down to zero, right? So let's circle back around to this idea of the zero waste kitchen. So the more salvage, the more low embodied energy materials you can use, the better. So you're trying to create a kitchen on the front end that's creating as little waste as possible, right? So I know like some of your sinks have, for example, like a jute fiber inside. So her company does these beautiful sinks you've been seeing, but they're cement, but they're a lower embodied cement because they mix this jute fiber in with the cement, right?
Right. It's a lower embodied energy because half of the material is replaced with this renewable jute fiber. So it's this jute that just grows like a weed in Vietnam, where these products are built.
Yeah.
And so they're infusing that into the concrete, and it reinforces it, makes it a lot stronger, and it reduces the weight by about half. So it's much easier, less expensive, and less energy to transport it, much easier to use and to install, and they're incredibly durable too. So they
and also the reason Portland cement is kind of an environmental no-no is because the heating process to create the cement is very intense and requires a lot of carbon. So the less of that Portland cement you can use, the better. So
exactly.
In case they don't know that. Can you touch on that one too? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I often encourage homeowners when they're thinking about gutting their house or renovating to, especially with the kitchens and the baths, is to let's really look at what this floor plan currently is, and maybe let's not try to reinvent this too much, because I think that becomes very costly and very wasteful out the gate when you're trying to move all of the plumbing, and it opens a whole can of worms and creates a domino effect that can be very costly, turn the project into something else, but also very wasteful. So if there is the opportunity to just kind of keep things placed where they are, it can make the project a lot easier, a lot smoother, and also a lot more efficient. I think kind of thinking about things where they are And
Are there some things worth keeping? Like, say, you've got a mid-century home and it's got, one of those blue bathrooms where all the fixtures are blue. Is it worth, in your experience, might it be wiser to, instead of just trashing the whole thing and starting over, maybe keep the blue sink and you keep some elements?
For sure. I mean, I'm usually drawn to all those crazy elements, like the crazy, colorful West Hollywood tiles that you see, and like the deco homes, and a mid-century home that has like a very old but interesting and like one-of-a-kind, unique cabinetry plan. There's often ways to revive those cabinets, and everyone wants like the nice, smooth, pulling-out drawers and beautiful interiors. But there are ways that you can update those and make them fully functional by changing the hinges. Replacing the shelving on the inside, but keeping the frames, and you really get to keep that character and reduce a lot of waste in the meantime. And also, that stuff that's been attached to the house for so long, if it's still in good condition and it just requires a contractor that's willing to put in the work and do the elbow grease to breathe new life into it, I mean, the home, it wants to stay with the home. And
well, I think also you have to, in fact, I just bought a mid-century home, and it's kind of, what's amazing to me is those bathrooms are still there and they're still intact. So maybe over to you, Joel, is part of this choosing products that are like hardscapes, like tile on the floors, or materials that are gonna last. So it's getting down to zero, is not creating future waste. Like I know we've studied how often people remodel. Showers are the most remodeled thing in a home, and the reason is because people don't seal the grout. So if you don't every year go and reseal that grout, the water goes right through it, gets into the board behind it, and causes sometimes black mold you've seen coming out your tiles. So that's an easy one. If you use epoxy grout, you can make those showers last 25 years instead of, I think it's 7 years is the average tear out on a tile shower. So is there stuff that you could do architecturally to make stuff last longer? Yeah.
That's a really great point. I feel like most of the decay in bathrooms is caused by humidity control and lack of venting. So
lack of venting?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So even in California, it's really strict. But if you go to all the resorts here in Vegas, I'm like, wait a second, where is the vent? Like, I just took a hot shower and the moisture is staying in here. And the moisture is never going to get out until you open up a window or it's somewhere in your walls. So I would say that having the knowledge for every homeowner, knowing this knowledge for every homeowner is really crucial to ensure the longevity of your home, first of all. And I feel like that's what you pass down to your kids or the future homeowners, like what are the necessary steps for care, right? If you're, compared to like renting in a building, like it's a whole different ballgame being a homeowner. And it all starts from there. And it could be a safety issue if there's black mold going in your bathroom.
Right, and if you put a range hood in a house that's got, that's an 80 sewn noisy range hood, no one's going to use it. Most people don't even use their range hoods no matter what the noise level is. But if you don't use your range hood, and I'll throw my 2 cents in here, the toxic level in a house that doesn't use a range hood is unbelievably high. Cooking is the most toxic thing you can do in a house if you don't use a range hood. Most people don't even bother to use them. They think it's all the stuff under the sink that's creating the toxins. It's not, it's the cooking. So, that's just one example of a product, like spend the extra for a quiet range hood that people will use and put an automatic sensor on it so that it will just come on when there's particles. So on that note, maybe that's another thing we could sort of, I know we're going to wind up here in a little bit, but let's each sort of talk about in your ideal remodel or redesign, what would be a couple of products that you would put in there that would be raise the sustainability bar, that would be timeless products, timeless materials that maybe every kitchen or every bath should consider. Go ahead.
Well, I love my recycled copper sink, I will say, and everyone who walks into my kitchen loves it. And when I tell them it is made out of, it used to be electrical wiring and pipes, and now it's this, beautiful hammered sink. It's, it's just a fun story. On my want list is I would like a under-counter compost bin. That's what I'd like.
Under-counter compost bin. Okay, that's a good one. And they make those electric ones now, right? They're a little bit of an electric assist. Yep.
Nice.
Okay.
I think, again, just thinking about like all natural materials, anywhere that you can think about them is just what I love to source. It's like what I love to build with. It's always what I recommend that clients look forward to. And things that are kind of like composite materials that are made out of recycled items. So solid surface tubs and sinks and things like that.
Yeah.
So I really gravitate towards those materials. I like the idea of what you can do with them now, and all the different colors and stuff that like these solid surfaces are coming in. I think are a great sustainable option as an alternative to the more expensive kind of natural stone.
Yep. How about you, Joel?
I would say that for us, we like to understand what the user needs first. Like if you design things that the user's not going to use
Then
on surfaces.
Waste of time. Right?
Exactly, it's a
Right,
complete
right.
waste of time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have clients that want 2 dishwashers, and we're like, that's really odd. Like, but some people like 2 dishwashers.
Right.
So,
The dishes.
yeah, it could be a really cool function, like for like a showpiece, like to guests that come over.
Okay.
So, like we like to ask, like, what are the necessary requirements that a homeowner needs, and how are they going to use it? How is every member of the family going to use each function?
Yeah.
And we design accordingly, right? I love the idea of composting for food waste. I think it's a great participation in the overall environmental cycle of your food, right?
Yeah.
Even I have one in my kitchen. So I think it's not just the practice, but also the philosophy that every user has, right? And then carries on and lives their life accordingly to that aspect at that level. Yeah.
So it sounds like you really need to listen to the client, and maybe it's partly what we do too, is you try to find like what's their sustainability hook, right? What's the thing that interests them? And it's interesting, the rooftop solar installations around the country actually got their start with the sort of libertarian movement, right? They weren't sort of this earthy, crunchy thing that we sort of think of. It was people who wanted to get away from the man, right? They didn't want the government in their business, and they started. So we started pushing solar to that group because we knew what their cultural interests were. So we're about to run out of time. So let's just like throw that last question out there about reaching people with a sustainability message, right? What's the key takeaway of selling sustainability that you like to leave people with?
Well, I mean, I think for what we do at Native Trails, it's really about the story behind the products, because all of our most products that have a sustainability story have something really interesting to say about them. I mean, people love to talk to their friends, for people to come into their home and to tell them that this used to be an old barn, and now it's my bath furniture. This used to be. I mean, they love to talk. I mean, I have these chairs that are made out of old milk. They used to be milk jugs, and now they're chairs. We didn't make them, but things like that. I think so. The story is really like people love story, whether or not they even care about the sustainability.
Right.
They love to have stories and to know that their products, what they have in their home, used to be something else and has history.
Let's go.
Yeah. I think it's thinking about how does this space speak to who you are. Going back to that idea of not wanting to live in a showroom or everything to be so perfect or everything to be designed by someone else, but to truly represent who you are in the journey and in the sourcing, but also in the thoughtfulness of how the materials were sourced, where they came from, how they were procured. Because ultimately, when people come over and you get to celebrate your space, that's the reward, is to brag about everything and to talk about everything and to have it truly be authentically something that you helped do and create and find and make. That's the selling point, I think, for sustainability.
And the one thing, Joel, because we're almost out of time, what's the one sustainability thing that the pitch that you think works the best?
I think it's, it might be a little bit bad to say this, but it's to play the conscience card, right? Everyone needs a conscience as they're living their lives through if you put it out there where you can decide one over the other, I think everyone should have the information and being educated on how important it is, right, to approach these things.
Cool.
So I would play the conscience card.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So I think that's, we're about out of time for our panel, but we're going to have some Q&A. So if anybody has questions for anybody, we got a microphone right here. Take it away. Yeah. Anyone?
We covered everything.
Huh? Yeah, we covered it all.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Somebody over here. Yeah.
There.
Over here.
Hi, thank you. So when you find yourself in a situation where you are ripping out a whole lot of stuff and you're not reusing things for whatever reason because you can't, do you have resources on a national level, preferably for what to do with those items and where they can go, whether that's old cabinetry or counters or furniture or anything like that?
So she's, I think, just to repeat to make sure everybody heard it, she's asking when you get rid of a lot of stuff, like say you're moving out of a house or whatever, and you want to, or you're demolishing a house and you have all these materials and products. What do you do with them, and how do you get them back sort of into the flow? Well, I know that those obviously the Habitat for Humanity restore will take a lot of stuff, but maybe you guys have some other ideas of how that places where that flow could be picked up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I feel like I get that question from clients all the time, and they kind of put it on me like it's my job. I'm like, this is not my job. But I do think there's a big hole in the market for a national resale market for unused construction goods or construction goods that can be repurposed. And I think there are local resources like that do exist. So you really have to kind of check with your area. But overall, I think the most successful and easiest place to do this is Facebook Marketplace. I mean, you put something on Facebook Marketplace, it is gone that day.
Yeah.
And for free. Like when I renovate a house, I'm like, I can't even bother with trying to make a buck off of this. I just have to get rid of it. And you could put the dishwasher and the refrigerator, it doesn't matter how old, it will get taken up by somebody who either needs it or has a business where they refurbish these things and sell them and put them on the market again.
Matt, do you have any, I've used Facebook, we've all used Facebook Marketplace probably for something, but I don't know about you, but I run into problems a lot where something that's shown, for example, is not accurate to what you actually, when you show up there, or it's sketchy. Do you have any sort of rules of thumb if you are shopping for used and salvaged materials on Facebook Marketplace? Like, how do you go about it? Like,
you just have a very discerning eye. Like if you're actually shopping for the stuff yourself.
Yeah,
just think you have to really make sure the pictures are good. It looks like, if you have any questions, definitely like ask and confirm, because you could waste a whole day trying to pick something up that is no good. And same thing on the flip side, if you're trying to sell something and get rid of it, just be like very honest about the dings and the dents and any information you have about it.
I think you're right, though. There's not enough architectural salvage. Like, I'm from Portland, Maine originally, and there's a place up there, and the woman's run it for many, many years, and she makes a good living at it. She takes, everything from a building, from the doors to the arched windows and the whole thing, and sells them back. They have a circular sort of building economy there, where she sells it back to other architects and other builders, and she moves a ton of materials all the time. And honestly, I wish every city had one. I don't think there's enough of that. So it's a great question. Anybody else have a question for the panel?
Yep, we have time for one more.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you for the interesting conversation and discussion. I have a question about due diligence on sustainability and claims, and also the environmental footprint of the different designs. Like, does that exist in the industry, and what do you guys rely on when it comes to ensuring that it actually has the impacts that it claims?
Okay. Let me just touch on that first, because I know we're deep in this right now, and many companies, for example, are coming out with EPDs, environmental product declarations. So you can actually look up their documents, and they'll tell you, where the material was sourced and how they got it. And so there's actually quite a bit of documentation. So in terms of, there's also something called ESGs, which is reports, and if you've heard of these, what is it? Environmental, social, governmental reports companies are putting out. So companies are starting to self-document, and I've found those are pretty reliable. Like, there's not a lot of greenwashing in those particular documents. But I'm sure there's other ways, right, to identify products that are really living up to their claims.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for wood, there's the FSC certification.
Right.
I think, you know, knowing the companies, if you know something about them and they have a history of, you know, being a company who cares, then that's going to probably go a long way. Then again, if it's a company who doesn't have that history, but maybe they're working on a product that is sustainable, you also want to give them credit for that. So it's a tough one.
What do you think, Matt?
I think it's about like transparency, right? It's like if you can't find any information about where their products are coming from or you know, or what they're all about, just reaching out to them and talking to them, and if they can immediately tell you a lot of things about where their products are sourced and how they're made, then you know, I feel like ethically, okay, this is a company that is, you know, worth working with. But if they can't, then I think that tells you right away that like this is, you know, they're probably not on the up and up in terms of their sustainability goals.
Joel?
Yeah, I think it's about assessing, I think like you mentioned, assessing certain claims that just because, or like pinpointing keywords in what the claims are in. For example, if they say it's recyclable, sure, a lot of things are recyclable, but what are the steps that, or practices they are taking? So just because they describe that it's recyclable, like we do need to know and understand what practice they have, like these companies have, right? In their firm, right? As to how the production has happened, how the entire life cycle, how the start to finish production system chain works. I think it's important to highlight those things.
Yeah, I think also you have to get into the details, right? Because, like, I'll give you an example. There's some products out there that claim to extract water from the air. You might have seen these, like they sell them in the West now in places that are really dry. But if you look into the technical details, some of these products use thousands of watts of electricity to draw that water out of the air. So it's really not an environmental win to pull water out of the air with that much energy. So. You know, the fine details matter, I think. So I think we're out of time. Thank you all, and we'll wrap it there.
Thank you.